Step into a saga set in New York's shimmering skyline, where a bold bet unleashes a storm of secrets and redemption. Can a tycoon's arrogance outlast the truth, or will love reshape his path? Stay for twists that will keep you riveted. If this sparks your interest, hit that subscribe button and share where you're tuning in from. Your support brings these stories to life. What's buried beneath this wager, and who's really pulling the strings? Dive in to uncover the answers. Declan Warwick stood at the edge of the rooftop gala, champagne flute in hand, the hum of Manhattan's elite swirling around him. His tuxedo was sharp, his blue eyes sharper, scanning the crowd with the instincts of a predator. At 35, he'd clawed his way to the top of New York's corporate jungle, crushing rivals with a smile. To Declan, life was a game, and he always won. He sipped his drink, the bubbles biting his tongue, when Jasper Colton, his old friend and occasional sparring partner, sidled up, a sly grin curling his lips. "Getting soft, Warwick?" Jasper's voice was smooth, laced with provocation. His dark hair gleamed under the gala's lights, green eyes glinting with a challenge. A venture capitalist who thrived on stirring trouble, Jasper knew exactly how to prod Declan's ego. Declan's laugh was low, confident. "Soft? Name one deal I've lost." Jasper swirled his champagne, the liquid catching a flicker of light. "Deals are one thing. I'm talking about a real test." He leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A bet. $1 million says you can't marry a woman who's not your type and stay married for 6 months." The words landed like a spark in dry grass. Declan's pulse quickened, though his expression stayed cool. His type was no secret. Sleek, elegant women who moved through his world like ornaments, their beauty a status symbol. Marriage, even a temporary one, to someone else. The idea was ludicrous, but the audacity of it hooked him. He thrived on proving doubters wrong, and Jasper's taunt was a gauntlet he couldn't ignore. "You're out of your mind," Declan said, but a smirk tugged at his lips. "Who's the woman?" Jasper's grin widened, predatory. "Sienna Harrow. She's not like your usual arm candy. Smart, stubborn, and immune to your charm." His tone held a warning, but Declan barely registered it. Sienna Harrow. The name was unfamiliar, a blank slate, but it carried a weight that stirred his competitive fire. He didn't need to know her yet. She was just another obstacle to conquer. $1 million? Declan's voice was laced with amusement. "You're handing me a win." He extended his hand, the gesture as binding as a contract. Jasper's grip was firm, but his eyes flickered with something unreadable. Amusement, or perhaps caution. "Terms are simple," Jasper said. "Marry her. Live with her for 6 months. No bailing, no bribes. You quit early, I win. You make it. The million's yours." He paused, his smile tightening. "But don't underestimate Sienna. She'll surprise you." Declan waved off the warning with a chuckle. He'd outmaneuvered tougher opponents, ruthless CEOs, cunning investors. A woman, no matter how stubborn, was just another puzzle to solve. His mind was already racing, plotting his approach. He'd charm her, control the terms, and walk away with Jasper's money. Easy. Jasper raised his glass, sealing the bet with a clink. "To your victory," he said, but the words felt double-edged. He slipped back into the crowd, leaving Declan alone with his thoughts. The gala's chatter pulsed around him, but his focus narrowed to the challenge ahead. Sienna Harrow. Who was she? A nobody, likely. Someone Jasper thought could rattle him. The idea was almost laughable. Declan drained his champagne, the sharp taste grounding him. He imagined Sienna, conjuring a vague image of a woman he could outwit. His usual playbook, gifts, flattery, power, would probably work, but Jasper's cryptic tone nagged at him. "She'll surprise you." The words lingered, a splinter in his confidence. He pushed them aside, but they clung, subtle and persistent. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, flashing his polished smile. But his mind was elsewhere. Tomorrow, he'd dig into Sienna's life, her job, her habits, anything to give him an edge. Knowledge was power, and Declan never entered a game unprepared. He pictured the moment he'd claim victory, Jasper's smug grin replaced by defeat. The $1 million was secondary. The real prize was proving he could master any challenge, no matter how absurd. Yet, as he nodded at a passing financier, a flicker of unease surfaced. Jasper wasn't one to bet lightly. They'd known each other since college, trading barbs and bets. But this felt different, bigger, riskier. Declan's fingers tightened around his empty glass. Was Jasper playing a deeper game? And who was this Sienna Harrow anyway? The name echoed in his head, a riddle he couldn't yet solve. He stepped to the rooftop's edge, the city's lights a distant blur. The gala's laughter faded, replaced by a quiet intensity. Declan Warwick didn't lose. Not in business, not in life. This bet was just another arena, and he dominated as always. But as he stood there, a faint tremor of doubt crept in, unbidden. What if Sienna wasn't just a pawn? What if the game was rigged in ways he couldn't see? The thought vanished as quickly as it came. Declan straightened, his jaw set. He'd find Sienna, win her over, and close this deal like any other. The bet was on, and failure wasn't an option. But in that fleeting moment, as the city hummed below, he couldn't shake the sense that this wager might cost him more than he'd bargained for. Declan Warwick adjusted his cufflinks, the silver glinting under the dim lights of the Hudson River restaurant. 2 days after Jasper's audacious bet, he'd moved fast, digging into Sienna Harrow's life with the precision of a corporate raid. A freelance digital artist, 32, with a modest Brooklyn apartment and a reputation for sharp wit. No socialite, no heiress, just a woman who, according to Jasper, could unravel him. Declan scoffed at the notion as he sipped his bourbon, the amber liquid warming his throat. He'd charm her, seal the deal, and claim his $1 million victory. The restaurant buzzed with the clink of glasses and murmured deals, its sleek tables filled with New York's power players. Declan had chosen this place for its aura of control, a stage where he always held the upper hand. He glanced at his watch, 7:58 p.m. Sienna was due any moment. His team had arranged the meeting under the guise of a potential art commission, a lure he was sure she'd bite. He leaned back, exuding the effortless confidence that had toppled rivals and won allies. This was his arena, and Sienna Harrow was just another player to outmaneuver. A shadow crossed the table. Declan looked up and his breath caught, though he masked it with a practiced smile. Sienna Harrow stood before him, her presence a quiet storm. Her dark hair fell in loose waves, framing a face that was striking not for conventional beauty, but for its intensity. High cheekbones, a jaw set with purpose, and hazel eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. Her simple black dress was elegant, but unpretentious, a stark contrast to the glittering gowns he was used to. She carried a leather portfolio, her posture relaxed, yet commanding. "You're Declan Warwick," she said, her voice low and steady, cutting through the restaurant's hum. It wasn't a question. She slid into the chair opposite him, without waiting for an invitation, her gaze never wavering. "I'm Sienna Harrow. Let's skip the pleasantries. I know why I'm here." Declan's smile tightened, a flicker of surprise betraying his composure. "Straight to the point," he said, leaning forward. "I like that. I'm interested in commissioning your work. Your portfolio caught my eye." The lie rolled off his tongue smoothly, but Sienna's expression didn't shift. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "Don't waste my time, Warwick. I know about the bet." The words landed like a slap, sharp and unyielding. Declan froze, his bourbon glass halfway to his lips. How the hell did she know? Jasper wouldn't have tipped her off. It wasn't his style. His mind raced, recalculating his approach, but Sienna didn't give him a chance to recover. You and your friend think this is a game, she continued, her tone cold but controlled. $1 million to marry someone like me for 6 months. I'm not flattered and I'm not your pawn. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a near whisper. But I'm here, so let's be clear. I have my own reasons for playing along, and they're not about your money or your ego. Declan set his glass down, the clink against the table masking his unease. He was used to holding the reins, but Sienna had just yanked them from his grasp. Her bluntness was disarming, her confidence a challenge that stirred something unfamiliar. Intrigue, laced with a hint of respect. He forced a chuckle, regaining his footing. You're well-informed, I'll give you that. So why are you here if not for the money? Sienna's lips curved. Not quite a smile, but a flicker of defiance. That's my business. If you want this bet to move forward, you'll respect that. I'm not one of your deals to close, Warwick. Try to control me, and you'll lose more than your million. Her words were a blade, precise and unyielding, cutting through his usual tactics. She opened her portfolio, sliding a sketch across the table, a vibrant digital piece, all sharp lines and bold colors. If you're serious about art, here's my work. If not, I'm done. Declan glanced at the sketch, its energy mirroring her intensity, but his focus was on her. She wasn't just a wild card. She was a force, one he hadn't anticipated. His usual playbook, charm, flattery, power, felt inadequate, and that realization unsettled him. He leaned back, studying her. You're not what I expected, he admitted, his voice softer, testing her reaction. Good, Sienna replied, snapping her portfolio shut. Keep that in mind. She stood, her movements deliberate, and extended her hand. If we're doing this, we meet again tomorrow. My terms, my place. I'll text you the details. Her handshake was firm, her grip a silent assertion of equality. Before Declan could respond, she turned and walked away, her figure cutting through the restaurant's crowd like a blade through silk. Declan watched her go, his bourbon forgotten. The gala's bet had felt like a game, a lark to stroke his ego. But Sienna Harrow was no mere opponent. She was a reckoning. His confidence, so unshakable 2 days ago, now bore a faint crack. Jasper's warning echoed. She'll surprise you. For the first time, Declan wondered if he'd underestimated his friend's gambit. He signaled for the check, his mind already racing to the next move. Sienna had drawn first blood, but this was far from over. The game was on, and he'd be damned if he let her set the rules. Declan Warwick's jaw tightened as he stepped out of the cab onto a quiet Brooklyn street, Sienna Harrow's text still burning in his mind. Meet me at my studio, 3 p.m. Don't be late. Her audacity at the restaurant, calling out his bet with Jasper, dictating terms, had left him rattled, a feeling he loathed. He'd spent the night dissecting her words, searching for leverage. Sienna wasn't just a challenge, she was a wildfire, and Declan was determined to contain her. He straightened his tailored jacket, his blue eyes scanning the nondescript building before him. This was her turf, but he'd turned the tables. Inside, the studio was a loft with exposed brick walls, cluttered with easels and glowing monitors displaying digital art. Sienna stood at a workbench, her dark hair tied back, hands smudged with stylus dust. She wore a loose sweater, her hazel eyes flicking up as he entered. Right on time, she said, her voice cool, no trace of warmth. She wiped her hands, gesturing to a small table with 2 chairs. Sit. We need to talk terms. Declan's lips twitched, masking his irritation at her commanding tone. Terms, he said, taking a seat. This isn't a merger, Sienna. His voice was smooth, But the jab was deliberate, testing her. She didn't flinch. "It's exactly a merger," she countered, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. "A contract. 6 months. No strings, no games beyond the bet. Sign it and we move forward." Her gaze was unyielding, daring him to push back. Declan scanned the document. Simple, ironclad, outlining a marriage for the bet's duration, with clauses ensuring her independence. No financial claims, no personal obligations. It was a fortress of boundaries, and it infuriated him. "You don't trust me," he said, leaning back, his tone laced with mock offense. "Smart, but unnecessary. I'm a man of my word." Sienna's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Your word means nothing until I see it in ink. You're here to win $1 million, not my trust." She tapped the paper. "Sign or I walk." Her bluntness was a blade, slicing through his usual charm. Declan's fingers tightened around the pen she offered, his mind racing. He could push back, negotiate, but her resolve was a wall he couldn't yet breach. For now, he'd play along. "Fine," he said, scrawling his signature with a flourish. "But don't think this makes you the boss." He slid the contract back, his smirk a challenge. Sienna pocketed the paper, unfazed. "I'm not your boss, Declan. I'm your equal. Remember that." She stood, signaling the meeting's end. "We'll marry in a week. Small, legal, no fanfare. I'll handle the details." Her dismissal was final, and as Declan left, he felt the ground shift beneath him. Sienna wasn't just playing the game, she was rewriting the rules. The wedding took place in a stark Manhattan clerk's office, a cold transaction witnessed by a board officiant and 2 strangers pulled from the hallway. Declan, in a crisp suit, stood beside Sienna, who wore a plain gray dress, her expression as unreadable as stone. The vows were mechanical, the rings cheap bands for show. When the officiant pronounced them married, Declan felt no triumph, only a gnawing sense of being outmaneuvered. Sienna slipped the ring off as soon as they left, tucking it into her pocket. "This changes nothing," she said, her voice flat. At Declan's penthouse, she paused by the towering windows, her silhouette stark against the city's glow. 6 months, she said, turning to face him. "That's all you get." She ignored the tray of champagne he'd set out, heading to a guest room with her single suitcase. Declan's offer of a diamond bracelet, left on her door, went untouched, a silent rebuke. Her defiance was maddening, yet it sparked a reluctant fascination. She wasn't swayed by his wealth, and that made her a puzzle he was determined to solve. Frustrated, Declan turned to control what he could. He contacted Sienna's clients, posing as a concerned partner, rescheduling her design meetings with vague excuses. If charm wouldn't work, he'd tighten the reins another way. He told himself it was strategy, but deep down, her resistance stung. She was supposed to bend, to admire his world, but instead, she was carving her own path through it. One evening, he found her sketching on a tablet in the penthouse's living room, her focus unbroken by his presence. "You can't ignore me forever," he said, leaning against the doorway, his voice a mix of amusement and edge. Sienna didn't look up. "I'm not ignoring you. I'm living my life. You should try it." Her words were a slap, casual, but cutting. She saved her work and stood, brushing past him. "Don't mess with my clients again, Declan. I know it was you." Her glance was brief, but piercing, leaving him exposed. How had she known? His control was slipping, and it infuriated him. As she disappeared down the hall, Declan's fists clenched. Jasper's bet was supposed to be a game, a quick win. But Sienna was no pawn. She was a queen, moving with a strategy he couldn't yet read. He poured a bourbon, the burn steadying him. She'd won this round, but he'd find her weakness. He always did. Yet, as he stared at the city beyond the windows, a flicker of doubt crept in. What if Sienna's strength wasn't a flaw to exploit, but a force he couldn't tame? Declan Warwick's fingers drummed against his desk, the penthouse silent, save for the faint hum of the city below. Sienna's parting shot, "Don't mess with my clients again," had stung more than he'd admit. She'd seen through his meddling, her sharp accusation exposing a crack in his control. For a week, he'd doubled down, rerouting her emails and delaying her payments through discreet calls to her clients, each move a calculated jab to force her compliance. Yet Sienna hadn't faltered, her silence in the penthouse a louder rebuke than any argument. Tonight, she was hosting a gallery opening in Soho, a showcase of her digital art. Declan saw his chance to tip the scales. He arrived at the gallery, a converted warehouse, pulsing with chatter and soft jazz. Sienna was nowhere in sight, but her work dominated the space. Vibrant murals glowing on wall-mounted screens, their bold lines and swirling colors drawing gasps from the crowd. Declan's jaw tightened. She was good, better than he'd expected. He'd hired a tech to glitch her display software, expecting chaos to humble her. As he sipped a whiskey, he waited for the inevitable crash, his smirk hidden behind the glass. The lights dimmed and Sienna appeared, striding to the center of the room. Her black jumpsuit was sleek, her dark hair swept up, hazel eyes scanning the crowd with quiet authority. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice carrying a calm that unnerved Declan. "Tonight's about art that fights to be seen." The screens flickered, and a murmur rippled through the room. Declan leaned forward, anticipating her failure. But Sienna didn't miss a beat. She grabbed a tablet, her fingers flying across the screen, and within moments, the murals stabilized, their colors sharper than before. The crowd erupted in applause, and Declan's grip on his glass tightened. She'd outmaneuvered him, again. His sabotage had backfired, turning her into the night's hero. As she mingled, accepting praise, Declan caught her glance, a brief, knowing look that burned. She knew he'd tampered with her show. The realization hit like a punch, stirring a mix of frustration and, grudgingly, admiration. Sienna wasn't just resilient. She was a force, thriving under pressure he'd engineered to break her. Jasper Colton appeared at his side, his grin sly. "She's something, isn't she?" he said, nodding toward Sienna. "Told you she'd surprise you." Declan shot him a glare, but Jasper's words echoed the warning from the gala. He downed his whiskey, the burn doing little to dull his unease. "Enjoying the show, Warwick? Or regretting that bet?" Jasper added, then vanished into the crowd, leaving Declan to stew. He approached Sienna, weaving through the throng. She was speaking to a curator, her laugh soft but genuine. When she saw him, her expression hardened, though her smile didn't waver. "Declan," she said, excusing herself from the curator. "Didn't expect you here." "Wouldn't miss it," he replied, his tone smooth but edged. "Impressive recovery. You're full of surprises." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "But don't think you've won." Sienna's eyes narrowed, her voice a whisper. "You tried to ruin this, didn't you?" "Pathetic." She stepped back, her gaze cutting through him. "Keep pushing, Declan, and you'll see what I'm capable of." She turned away, rejoining the crowd, leaving him rooted in place. Her words weren't just a threat. They were a promise, and for the first time, Declan felt the ground shift beneath him. Back at the penthouse, he paced, the city's lights a blur beyond the windows. Sienna's triumph replayed in his mind, her quick thinking, her unshakable poise. He'd underestimated her, and it cost him. Worse, her accusation had peeled back his facade, exposing a truth he dodged. His need for control was faltering. He poured a bourbon, the glass cold against his palm, but didn't drink. Instead, he sank into a chair, staring at the guest room door where Sienna slept. She was supposed to be a means to an end, a bet to win. So why did her strength unsettle him so deeply? He thought of Jasper's taunt, the gallery's applause, Sienna's piercing gaze. Each was a crack in his armor, and he hated it. Control was his currency, but Sienna was rewriting the exchange rate. He needed a new strategy, something to shake her confidence. Her art was her pride. Maybe that was the key. He could fund a rival exhibition, poach her clients, anything to dim her light. But even as he schemed, a flicker of doubt crept in. Was he fighting to win, or to prove something to himself? Sienna's door opened, and she emerged, still in her jumpsuit, a tablet under her arm. She paused, spotting him. "Can't sleep?" she asked, her tone neutral but probing. Declan met her gaze, searching for weakness, but found only steel. "Thinking about your next move," he said, standing. "You're good, Sienna, but I'm better." Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "Keep telling yourself that." She walked past, her shoulder brushing his, a spark of defiance in the contact. As the guest room door closed, Declan's resolve hardened. This was war, and he'd strike next. But deep down, a voice whispered that Sienna Harrow might be the one battle he couldn't win. Declan Warwick stood on the penthouse balcony, the rain lashing against the glass doors behind him, a mirror to the storm brewing within. Sienna's triumph at the Soho Gallery 3 nights ago, her murals blazing despite his sabotage. Her cutting words, "Keep pushing and you'll see what I'm capable of," had left him reeling. She'd outplayed him, her defiance a blade that sliced through his control. Since then, the penthouse had been a battlefield of silence. Sienna's presence a constant challenge. Tonight, he'd had enough. He needed answers, and he'd force them from her. The balcony door slid open, and Sienna stepped out, her dark hair damp from the rain, hazel eyes glinting with a fury that stopped him cold. She wore a simple sweater, but her stance was anything but soft. Shoulders squared, fists clenched. "You wanted to fight, Declan?" she said, her voice low, slicing through the storm's roar. "Here I am." Declan's jaw tightened, his bourbon glass slick in his hand. "You think you can keep dodging me?" he shot back, stepping closer. "I know you're hiding something. What's your game, Sienna? Why play along with this bet if you hate me so much?" His words were a demand, his blue eyes searching hers for a crack in her armor. She'd known about the bet from the start, manipulated the terms, and now thwarted his every move. He needed to know why. Sienna's laugh was bitter, a sound that chilled him more than the rain. "My game," she said, her voice rising, raw with pain. "You destroyed my father, Declan, Elias Harrow. His tech startup was everything to him, and your company crushed it like it was nothing." Her words hit like a fist, each syllable heavy with accusation. Declan froze, the name sparking a vague memory. A small firm, a hostile takeover years ago. Just another deal in his climb to power. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of boardroom decisions, contracts signed without a second thought. Sienna stepped closer, undeterred by the rain soaking her sweater, her eyes blazing. "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "You bought his company for pennies, gutted it, and left him with nothing. He killed himself, Declan. My father took his life because of you." Her voice broke, a crack in her steel facade, and Declan felt the ground shift beneath him. The bourbon glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the balcony floor, the sound swallowed by the storm. "I didn't know," he said, the words hollow, desperate. But Sienna wasn't done. She advanced, her anger a living thing, filling the space between them. "You didn't know because you didn't care," she said, her voice a whip. "I emailed you, begging you to spare his company. I poured my heart into those messages and you ignored them. You were too busy building your empire to notice the lives you ruined." Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with a rage that seared him. Declan staggered back, the weight of her words crushing his defenses. He remembered those emails now, unread, deleted by assistants, dismissed as noise in his relentless pursuit of success. "Sienna, he started. But she cut him off, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "I joined this bet to make you feel what I felt," she said. "Helpless, manipulated, powerless. You thought you were playing me, but I've been playing you from the start." Her words were a revelation, each one dismantling the confidence he'd clung to. The bet with Jasper, his schemes to control her, all of it was a trap she'd set, and he'd walked right into it. The realization was a knife to his gut, twisting deeper with every breath. Declan's hands shook, rain dripping from his hair. "Why didn't you just tell me?" he asked, his voice raw, almost pleading. "Why this game?" Sienna's gaze softened, but only for a moment, replaced by a steely resolve. "Because you wouldn't have listened," she said. "Men like you don't hear the truth until it's forced on you. I wanted you to feel the cost of your actions, to carry it like I have." She stepped back, the distance between them a chasm. "This isn't over, Declan. You'll see." She turned, heading back inside, her silhouette fading into the penthouse's shadows. Declan stood frozen, rain soaking his suit, the shattered glass at his feet, a mirror of his fractured certainty. Elias Harrow's name echoed in his mind, a ghost from a past he'd buried under wealth and ambition. He'd crushed countless companies, but this one had a face now, a daughter who'd turned his game against him. He sank against the railing, the city's hum drowned by the storm. Sienna's words replayed. "I've been playing you from the start." He'd thought himself the master, but she'd been the strategist. Her every move calculated to expose his flaws. The bet, the marriage, the gallery, all pieces in her chess game, and he was the pawn. The weight of her father's death pressed down, a guilt he couldn't shake. How many others had he destroyed without a second thought? Declan's fingers dug into the railing, his breath uneven. He needed to fight back, to reclaim control, but the fire in Sienna's eyes warned him she wasn't done. She'd promised more, and he dreaded what came next. As the rain fell, he felt the first stirrings of something new. Not just fear, but a dawning awareness that this woman, this bet, might unravel everything he was. Declan Warwick sat in the penthouse's darkened living room, the city's glow, a faint pulse through the rain-streaked windows. Sienna's words from the balcony 3 nights ago, "You destroyed my father," echoed like a relentless drum, each syllable a weight on his chest. Elias Harrow's suicide, her emails he'd ignored, her calculated entry into his bet with Jasper. They'd stripped his arrogance bare, leaving a raw, unfamiliar guilt. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying her fury, her promise of more to come. Sienna's silence since then was a blade, sharper than any shout, and he braced for her next move. She moved through the penthouse like a phantom, her presence a constant accusation. Meals were silent, her gaze never meeting his, her door closing with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Declan's empire was faltering too. Client contracts stalled, boardroom leaks surfaced online, each setback bearing Sienna's invisible fingerprints. He'd tried confronting her, but her cold indifference deflected every word. Tonight, he couldn't take it anymore. He needed to break through, to understand the depth of her vengeance. He found her in her studio room, a converted office filled with glowing screens and scattered sketches. Sienna sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at a faded photo in her hands, her dark hair loose, hazel eyes distant. The vulnerability caught him off guard, but her head snapped up as he entered, the softness vanishing. "What do you want, Declan?" she asked, her voice flat, though a tremor betrayed her. "To talk," he said, stepping closer, his voice rough with sleepless nights. "You can't keep punishing me like this. Tell me what you want." He gestured to the penthouse, his frustration spilling. "You're tearing my life apart, isn't that enough?" Sienna stood, the photo slipping to the floor. A man with her eyes, Elias Harrow. Her laugh was hollow, cutting. "Enough? You think this is about your deals, your reputation?" She crossed her arms, her voice rising, raw and jagged. "You took more than my father, Declan. You took my child." The words landed like a thunderbolt, stopping his heart. He stared, uncomprehending as she continued, her voice breaking. "When your takeover crushed his company, I was pregnant. The stress, the grief, it was too much. I lost my baby because of you." Declan's knees buckled, and he gripped the desk to stay upright. A child. The weight of her loss crashed over him, heavier than the guilt of her father's death. His mouth opened, but no words came, only a choked sound. Sienna's eyes glistened, but she held her ground, her pain a fortress. "You didn't just ruin a business," she said, her voice low, venomous. "You destroyed a family, my family, and you didn't even notice." "I didn't know," he whispered, the words useless, a desperate plea. Memories of his relentless ambition, signing off on Harrow's company, dismissing countless pleas, flooded back, each one a nail in his conscience. He'd thought himself a titan, untouchable, but Sienna's truth revealed a monster. "Sienna, I'm so sorry," he said, stepping toward her, but she raised a hand, stopping him cold. "Don't," she snapped, her voice steel. "Your apologies mean nothing. You can't undo what you did." She picked up the photo, her fingers trembling. "I keep this to remember why I'm here. Every leak, every setback you're facing, I planned it. I wanted you to feel a fraction of my pain." Her eyes met his, fierce and unyielding. "And I'm not done." Declan's chest tightened, her words a sentence he couldn't escape. He wanted to fight back, to argue, but the image of her loss, a child, a life, silenced him. He saw her now, not just as an adversary, but as a woman carrying a grief he'd caused. The bet, Jasper's $1 million, his need for control, all seemed trivial against her suffering. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice raw, almost pleading. Sienna's gaze softened, but only for a moment, replaced by a weary resolve. "I want you to live with it," she said. "The guilt, the consequences. You don't get to walk away clean." She turned to her screen, dismissing him but paused. "Get out, Declan. I have work to do." Her voice was quiet, final, and he obeyed, retreating to the living room, the doors click behind him, a gunshot in his mind. He sank onto the couch, head in hands, the city's hum a distant drone. Sienna's revelation had shattered him, each word a mirror to his recklessness. He'd crushed lives, hers most of all, and the cost was no longer abstract. A child. The thought clawed at him, a wound that wouldn't close. He thought of Jasper's bet, the gala's laughter, his smug acceptance. It was a game then, but now it was a reckoning, and he was losing. Sienna's sabotage, those leaks, the unraveling deals, would continue, he knew. She'd promised more, and her pain gave her power he couldn't match. He needed to act, to find a way to stop her. But his usual tactics felt hollow. Charm, threats, manipulation, they'd failed against her truth. For the first time, Declan wondered if winning was even possible, or if he'd already lost something he couldn't name. As the rain eased, he stared at the studio door, her light still burning. Sienna was a storm he'd unleashed, and he was caught in its center. The guilt was his now, a shadow he'd carry, but a flicker of resolve stirred. He couldn't undo the past, but he'd face her next move, whatever it cost. The game wasn't over, but the rules had changed, and Declan Warwick was no longer sure who held the board. Declan Warwick stood in the penthouse kitchen, the scent of brewing coffee cutting through the morning's quiet. Sienna's revelation, her lost child, a casualty of his ruthless ambition, had haunted him for days, each word a stone in the growing pile of his guilt. Her silent vengeance, the leaks crippling his firm, and her cold dismissal, "Your apologies mean nothing," had left him hollow, a shadow of the tycoon who'd once ruled Manhattan's boardrooms. But in that emptiness, a spark had ignited. Words wouldn't undo his sins, but actions might. Today, he'd start proving he could change. He set a mug of strong coffee, no sugar, on the counter, a quiet offering for Sienna. She'd ignored his attempts to speak since their studio confrontation, her presence in the penthouse a wall he couldn't breach. But he'd noticed her habits, her love for lavender, the way she lingered over black coffee. Small gestures were his only way in, a tentative bridge to a woman he'd wronged beyond measure. He left a sprig of lavender beside the mug, its purple bloom a silent plea, and slipped out before she woke. Declan's next step took him to the Bronx, a world away from his polished life. He stood before a shuttered bodega, its faded sign barely legible, Martinez Groceries. Years ago, his firm's expansion had driven this shop under, one of many casualties he'd dismissed. Now, armed with Sienna's pain, he saw the human toll. He knocked, and Rosa Martinez answered, her weathered face hardening at his name. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp with old wounds. "I'm here to make things right," Declan said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "I hurt your family, and I'm sorry. I want to help you rebuild." Rosa's eyes narrowed, distrust etched deep, but he pressed on, offering a check to restart her business and a promise to connect her with suppliers. She took the check, her silence heavy, and said, "This doesn't erase the past." Declan nodded. "I know, but it's a start." As he left, her words echoed Sienna's, a reminder that redemption was a marathon, not a sprint. Back at the penthouse, Sienna stood by the counter, the coffee mug in her hand, the lavender sprig untouched but not discarded. She didn't acknowledge him, but her glance lingered, a crack in her icy facade. Declan's heart quickened, progress, however slight. He kept at it, leaving small tokens. A sketchpad she'd mentioned needing, a playlist of jazz she'd hummed in passing. He stopped hovering, giving her space, but each gesture was a vow. "I'm trying." His atonement extended beyond the penthouse. He tracked down others he'd harmed, a Queens baker, a Harlem startup founder, offering funds, resources, apologies. Each meeting was a mirror, reflecting the wreckage of his ambition. The guilt didn't fade, but it fueled him. Sienna's loss, her father's death, her unborn child, they were his burden now, and he'd carry it by rebuilding what he'd broken. Sienna's sabotage continued, though. Another leak hit his firm, a client email exposing a flawed deal, and Declan knew her hand was behind it. He could have fought back, hired investigators, but he didn't. Her pain justified her actions, and he'd endure them. Instead, he focused on her, watching for signs of softening. One evening, he found her on the balcony, wrapped in a shawl, staring at the city. He approached, holding a cup of chamomile tea, her nighttime ritual. "Thought you might want this," he said, keeping his voice low, offering the cup. Sienna hesitated, then took it, her fingers brushing his. The contact was fleeting, but it sent a jolt through him. She sipped, her silence less hostile than before. Emboldened, he spoke. "I know I can't fix what I did, Sienna, but I'm trying to be better. For you, for me." She turned, her hazel eyes searching his, a storm of pain and curiosity. "Why?" she asked, her voice soft but piercing. "Why keep doing this when I've made it clear I won't forgive you?" Declan swallowed, the truth spilling out. Because I see you now. Not as a bet, not as an opponent. You're stronger than anyone I've known, and I want to be someone who deserves to stand beside you." His voice cracked, raw with a sincerity he barely recognized. Sienna's gaze held his, her expression unreadable, but she didn't turn away. "You can't erase the past," she said finally, echoing Rosa's words, but her tone lacked its earlier venom. "But I see you trying. That's something." She looked back at the city, the tea steaming in her hands. "Don't expect miracles, Declan. This doesn't change everything." "I know," he said, his voice steady. "But I'll keep going." She nodded, a faint gesture, and returned inside, leaving him on the balcony. The moment wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door cracked open, a sliver of hope in their fractured world. Declan leaned against the railing, the city's pulse steadying him. Sienna's strength, her pain, had reshaped him, forcing him to face the man he'd been. He wasn't that man anymore, or he was trying not to be. The leaks would continue, her vengeance a shadow. But he'd face it. He'd keep building bridges, one small act at a time, until she saw him as more than her enemy. As he turned to go inside, he glanced at the lavender on the counter, still there. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The road to redemption was long, but Declan Warwick was walking it, step by painful step, for a woman who'd changed everything. Declan Warwick stood in the penthouse kitchen, the morning light casting long shadows across the counter. The lavender sprig he'd left yesterday was gone, tucked away by Sienna, a silent acknowledgement that fueled his cautious hope. Her faint softening on the balcony, "I see you trying," had lingered, a fragile thread in the tapestry of their fractured marriage. The 6-month bet with Jasper Colton was nearing its end, but Declan no longer cared about the $1 million. Sienna's pain, her strength, had reshaped him, and he wanted more than a victory. He wanted her, not as a prize, but as a partner. He brewed her coffee, strong and unsweetened, setting it beside a new sketchpad, its pages blank for her art. His gestures had become a ritual, each one a step on the road to redemption. Sienna's sabotage had slowed, fewer leaks, no new blows to his firm, but her guard remained, her hazel eyes still wary. Declan had continued his atonement, funding a Harlem startup and mentoring a Queens baker, each act a brick in the foundation of a man he hoped she'd respect. Today, he'd push further, risking everything for a chance at something real. Sienna emerged, her dark hair loose, a sweater hugging her frame. She paused at the coffee, her fingers brushing the sketchpad, and glanced at him. "You don't give up, do you?" she said, her voice soft but probing, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "Not when it matters," Declan replied, his blue eyes steady. He stepped closer, heart pounding. "Sienna, the bet's almost over, but I don't want us to end. I love you." The words spilled out, raw and unpolished, a truth he'd only dared admit in the quiet of his mind. Her breath caught, her eyes widening, and for a moment, the penthouse held its breath. Sienna set the coffee down, her gaze searching his. "Love," she said, her voice a mix of disbelief and challenge. "After everything. My father, my child. You think you can just say that?" Her words were sharp, but her tone wavered, betraying a flicker of longing beneath the pain. "I know I can't erase what I did," Declan said, his voice low, fervent. "But I see you, Sienna. Your strength, your art, your heart. I'm not the man I was, and I'll spend my life proving it, if you'll let me." He reached for her hand, pausing an inch away, waiting for her to close the gap. She didn't pull back, her fingers trembling as they met his, a spark igniting in the touch. Sienna's eyes glistened, her resolve cracking. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I loved once and I lost everything, but I see you changing and I love you too. The confession was a leap, her voice steady despite the tears. Declan's heart soared, and he pulled her close, their embrace a fragile bridge over the chasm of their past. The days that followed were a quiet dance. They shared breakfasts, her laughter a melody he hadn't known he craved. She sketched in the living room, her tablet glowing, while he worked nearby, their silences now warm. The bet's deadline passed, unnoticed. Jasper's $1 million irrelevant. Declan proposed a new wedding, not for a wager, but for love. "Marry me again, Sienna," he said one evening, a simple ring in his palm. "For real this time." She said yes, her smile a sunrise. Months later, Sienna felt a flutter, a morning's nausea that led to a test. Its 2 lines, a promise of new life. She told Declan in the kitchen, her voice trembling with joy. He laughed, tears streaming, lifting her in a spin, the weight of their past lighter in the face of their future. "We're a family," he whispered, his hand on her stomach, and Sienna nodded, her eyes bright. Their second wedding was intimate, held in a Central Park grove. The spring air, soft with cherry blossoms. Friends and a few artists from Sienna's circle gathered, their cheers a chorus of renewal. Sienna, in a flowing white dress, glowed, her hands steady in Declan's. The vows were their own, raw and true. "I choose you," she said, her voice clear, "for all we've been and all will be." Declan's voice cracked as he echoed her, the ring sliding onto her finger, a seal of their rebirth. As they danced under a canopy of stars, Sienna's head rested on his chest. "A bet started this," she murmured, her voice warm with wonder. Declan smiled, his arms tightening. "Love finishes it." The music swirled, their steps a promise of tomorrow. Yet, in her heart, Sienna held one secret, a letter from her father, hinting at a choice she'd never shared. She'd kept it hidden, choosing their new life over old pain, a silent vow to protect their dawn. Declan felt her shift, sensing a shadow in her gaze. "What is it?" he asked, his voice gentle. Sienna shook her head, her smile soft. "Just the past," she said. "It's gone now." He didn't press, trusting her silence. They danced on, the city's pulse a heartbeat in their story. The bet, Jasper's game, the pain. They'd all led here, to a love forged in fire, a family waiting to grow. Declan Warwick, once a king of conquest, was now a man of redemption, and Sienna Harrow was his home. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey through the game of fate. We hope Declan and Sienna's story of redemption and love touched your heart. What did you think? Did Sienna make the right choice in forgiving Declan? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Your support means the world, so keep tuning in for more stories that captivate and inspire. Until next time, stay curious and take care.